Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the guided podcast this week. Catherine Ann, our resident intuitive astrologer, is here again to discuss the full moon lunar eclipse in Virgo that will be occurring on March 13th. So we are officially in eclipse season. And Catherine, where are we going to be eclipsed?
Yes, back in eclipse season, it feels like it was just here because time is moving so quickly. But our last eclipse season was in the fall of 2024. So now moving into the spring of 2025, we're going to have both a lunar eclipse and a solar eclipse. Today, we're going to be talking about the lunar eclipse in Virgo. And the important thing to know to really just talk about this new eclipse cycle is that we are now in, as of January, in that 18-month journey of the Virgo Pisces nodal axis. So we did dip our toes last September in a Pisces eclipse, but ironically, the nodes weren't in Virgo and Pisces yet. It was just the way it all worked out. And so now we're fully into this Virgo Pisces journey. So we've talked a lot over the past year and a half about Libra and Aries and that self and others, codependency, selfishness, I need to do me, kind of like all that, that me and we axis. Now we're on Pisces Virgo, completely different vibe. And we're talking about Virgo, which is that earth energy and healing and groundedness. And then Pisces on the other side, which is floaty and magical and spiritual and also healing, but in a different way. So, this is a healing axis that we're on with this Virgo and Pisces. And so, with this lunar eclipse in Virgo, this is our first big exploration into the eclipse cycle with Virgo and being fully with these nodes on the Pisces Virgo axis. So, a typical moon in Virgo is going to really have us focus on order, cleanliness, discernment. We're going to want to like diligently work on things. It also has Virgo is very much of service to others. So it's like the Boy Scout of the zodiac. So it could be that you're in this Virgo space of wanting to serve others. So that would be if it were just a typical full moon in Virgo, we'd be looking at what is coming to light in the Virgo areas of your chart that where you're doing those elements, you're organizing things, you're being of service, you're getting your health in check. It's all very orderly and organized and grounded. But because we're in this lunar eclipse, it takes on a whole different vibration. So the lunar eclipse is with the south node. The south node is where we release, it's where energy gets sucked down the drain. So this is very much a releasing eclipse. And South Node eclipse, that's typical. They're releasing. But when we're doing it with Virgo, we're talking about what needs to be released for the benefit of our health and wellness. What needs to be released for the benefit of our own discernment, our own organizational being, and also what needs to be released so that we can better serve. And so this is not about what are we bringing in. It's about, even though we're at a full moon and we're at this culmination point of what's coming to light, what's really going to come to light is if I want to keep growing my health, my well-being, my ability to serve others, I've got to let go of some pretty significant things because eclipses are significant. The energy is not tiptoeing around, "Oh, wouldn't that be nice if I could gently release something?" The eclipse energy will come in and do it for you. With that energy, the theme that Spirit gave me is healing is not optional. And I feel like take that to heed. They're saying it almost like a warning. Healing is not optional. So if you want to hide your head in the sand, be prepared for some sort of experience that is going to put you on a healing journey. It is not optional.
Yeah. When you say that, the thing that comes to mind is we are always called to take great responsibility for our healing. And when we break down that word responsibility, it's about responding with ability. It's not about getting it perfect. It's not about always getting it right. But can you take responsibility for leaning into the areas of your life where you are wounded? Where we are being called to bring more love to heal these different wounds. And I think when you talk about health, when I had my individual like transit reading with you recently, you're like, Lindsay, the next 5 months, they're all about your health. And I do. I just had surgery by the time this airs. And when I found out what medically was wrong with me, I went into the spiritual realm and I talked to spirit to say, help me understand the meaning of this medical issue. And they gave me and illuminated all of the places that were out of balance, all of the emotional root causes that led to the manifestation of this physical pain. And is it my fault that I now have these problems? No, right? This isn't about blaming or shaming, but especially when we're sensitive, all the while, I was doing my best to release emotions and lean into my healing, and I was taking great responsibility for what I needed to, and there was just a lot of emotion that was all stirred up, and sometimes I was so overwhelmed by emotion in my healing and breaking these old patterns and stepping into my own becoming that it was like just creating resistance upon resistance upon resistance. And so I share that with you all just because it's real. Like, this is often what happens when we're making really big changes and transitions in our life. And now I can understand as you're saying all of this, like taking responsibility is what really allows us to release the baggage that we're carrying. And if we don't, Spirit always says to me, ignored emotions grow stronger and louder. So the more we resist, that will persist in much bigger ways. And the other thing that they constantly say is on the heels of that is if you choose to use your words, if you choose to put your head in the sand, be prepared to choose lessons. Essentially, right? Because we can choose to consciously move towards our healing, or we can choose to unconsciously move into our healing. And while I think there's pros and cons of both, ultimately, I think that when we take responsibility for our healing, when we are genuinely trying to see the unseen, when we are trying to understand why we have certain patterns, Spirit's supporting us in that. And I think we then choose a less painful journey, right? Because what is that saying? Evolution is mandatory, but suffering is optional. So how much do you want to suffer? And I think the more that we put our head in the sands, we're going to suffer, not because we're being punished, but because spirit's trying to say, hey, we're calling your attention to see something that isn't serving you anymore. And if you take responsibility to place your attention on healing this, you get to step into this new person who you want to be that's more closely aligned with the truth of who you are and love. And you get to create what you actually want on the other side of these things. And that is a long winded way of saying I am in full support of taking responsibility for your healing. So,
No, it's great because I hadn't even brought this up yet, but Saturn is sitting right with the sun. That means directly opposing this full moon that is being eclipsed. And Saturn is take responsibility. Take responsibility for yourself. Determination, responsibility, accountability, self discipline. It can be a little rigid about it, but it is take responsibility. And I think the thing about this is that when we're taking responsibility for our healing, that doesn't mean we know how everything is going to happen. It just means that we are being more conscious as we step through each experience to heal what's coming up. And one of the things that's so important about what you were sharing is last spring during eclipse season, we had a very big eclipse in Aries with Mars and Chiron right there, right on top of it. And at that time, it was like, okay, wounds are being opened. Wounds are going to be coming up over this next year to be healed. And so now what's really interesting is with this lunar eclipse in Virgo, we have Mars in Cancer connecting with Chiron in Aries, and Mars just turned direct after all of these months of like deep exploration. And now it's saying, I have the capacity to attack. Mars is going to attack these wounds. And so, what I would say is, what's coming up for this whole past year since last April, where hopefully you've been chipping away at those wounds and doing some healing work because this eclipse is saying it's go time. We are taking action on this healing and we are letting go what needs to be let go. And as you said, or we're going to choose the lessons. And as so often in all of these conversations, we've talked about Uranus. Uranus is a big player this year, seems to want to be involved every time we talk. And yet again, we have Uranus involved. So, trine the moon, sextile the sun, which those are supportive aspects, but it's still Uranus. It's still breakthrough, breakdown, change, unexpected. So, are they going to be for our good? Yes, they're going to be for our good. Does for our good always feel good? No. And that's really important because I just keep getting this really strong image. And it's hilarious because I've heard another astrologer talk about the South Node being like the toilet bowl, right? Like we're flushing it down the drain. And I keep feeling this sucking out energy with this eclipse. And so, since Uranus is there, something could unexpectedly leave. And it is for your good. Is it going to feel like it's for your good? Maybe not. It depends on, have you been taking responsibility for your healing? Because if you have an inkling of what's about to happen, right? You may not know how it's going to show up, but you have that. There's shift. I know there's shift. I don't know what it is, but I can feel their shift coming, and I'm opening myself up to the possibility of whatever that is for my good.
Yeah.
And if you aren't, you might be blindsided.
Yeah. I think as you're talking through all of this, and as we think about that word responsibility, I think what essentially I'm feeling is that when we take responsibility for our healing, it allows us to act from a place of integrity, act from a place of congruence between the truth of who we are and how we need to show up that is in alignment with that. Versus when we act from a place of fear, when we act from a place of our wounds, it throws us out of integrity. And then what ends up happening on the flip side of that is we make decisions that we later regret. We make decisions that don't make us feel good about ourselves. They make us feel shame. They make us feel guilty. They make us feel right. And so then it's like you're already feeling and experiencing the struggle from the healing. And then we're acting out of integrity if we're not taking responsibility for the healing. And that only compounds the suffering, right? And so, or at least compounds what now needs to be healed. It adds a whole other layer of healing. Whereas when we're taking responsibility, it gives us that grace and space to find what it means to be within integrity within ourselves in relation to whatever we're healing and move forward with that level of conscious awareness. And I think that's part of what really supercharges the pathway to actually healing the parts of us that need to be loved more deeply.
And I think that one of the things that's so hard to understand is that direct correlation between your emotional space, your mental space, and your physical space. And there are opportunities here. I almost want to say to cut it off at the pass, right? To like, you've been shown something that's not serving you, or that's an obstacle that's blocking you from better health and well being, or wanting to be of service, but something's blocking you. And how much more do you need to be shown to get it?
Well, and I think you're bringing up a good point here because I think when we are confronted with parts of ourselves that are the shadow, right? These are the parts of ourselves that it's hard for us to really embrace. These are things that we perhaps don't like about ourselves or don't want to admit the truth about ourselves that this is something that is part of us. This is something that we've come in here to heal. And if we judge it to be wrong or bad, or it causes us to show up in ways that send us to act in ways that are out of integrity, who wants to see that? It's not like it's fun to dive in and be like, hey, this is me. Woohoo, right? We don't love those things about ourselves. And so I think this is why this work requires such emotional bravery because you have to be willing to get radically honest with yourself and admit the truth to yourself about what you're seeing. And I know the moments in my own life where I've had to come face to face with my own darkness within and be like, this is not a truth I want to admit about myself. But when we bring light to that darkness, the fear dissipates, right? It's able to transform. Once we're able to make the unseen seen, then it can change. And thank goodness that everything can change. And that's, I think, what's so empowering about the fact that we have the ability to take responsibility for our healing because you have the ability to change absolutely everything about you. I mean, I know I have seen people in my own sphere change in ways that are like mind blowing to me, right? Changing things that I never even thought I would see change in this lifetime. And it's like, there is no question that there is a mass awakening happening on this planet. And people are growing, people are changing at very accelerated rates. And so, what an opportunity for us to look at this like, you know what? I'm just going to take the reins and I'm going to see what I need to see. And by the way, that's such a beautiful intention for people to set with spirit. Help me see what I need to see. Help me be willing to lean into this wound or this pain. Help me to heal this and really see what I need to see here. And I think that's where the responsibility for the healing really begins.
It does. And it's interesting that you brought in the concept of the mass awakening because spirit's really pulling me to talk about this global energy right now. And I feel like so much of our focus on the guided podcast is our own healing, our own consciousness journey, our own spiritual awakening. But this is a mass awakening. And in this Virgo Pisces axis that we're going to be on for the next year and a half, there are going to be big global topics around health and wellness, mental health, physical health, serving others, our spiritual beliefs. These are going to be really big topics globally. And that's the Pisces side of that spiritual awakening. But it's also the Virgo side of what collective patterns or habits have to be let go of to better the health of the collective, physically, emotionally, mentally. What do we need to say is not serving our collective well being anymore? And it's really interesting because they're just like yelling in my ear about this Pluto and Virgo generation, which is the grown-ups. What is it that grown-ups? I am 50 years old. I should be in the grown-ups, but I do not include myself in there. It's like the boomer generation, right? So a lot of our political leaders, a lot of our leaders in all industries, healthcare, education, if they are in that boomer generation, they are in this Pluto and Virgo generation that the South Node is going to be going by for the next year and a half. And it's going to impact this generation in the way of what were things that were established status quo for so long that now has to be let go of for the betterment of the next generations. And so I really see this coming to light in the sense of us taking responsibility for healthcare issues, environmental issues, how we treat people, even in the sense of like pandemic type stuff and just in general, what needs to be let go of for the collective betterment. Now that we have Pluto has moved into Aquarius and we're going to be talking a lot more about humanity as a whole, but the older system has to continue its breakdown. And we talked a lot about Pluto in Capricorn and the breakdown of kind of these corporate structures. But now I feel like we're talking about the breakdown of not like necessarily, I mean, the corporate structures are still happening, but it's more that breakdown of the daily habits and the way we live our life in a way that may not always be supporting our well being or the well-being of others. And I think that that's something that on the bigger picture, this eclipse is really saying we have to take responsibility for this. The healing of our collective is not optional. And healing has growing pain. So that's not always comfortable. And not everybody's on board with this. A lot of people aren't having these conversations, right? But healing is not optional. And so I feel like that in this eclipse season that already eclipsy is change and unknown and unexpected, then we throw that little dash of Uranus in there that is going to be more change and unknown and unexpected. It's there's a lot that's going to be happening in March and April with this eclipse season that is external and internal. And so we talk about this so much, but the more we're working on our internal space, the better we weather the external space.
Yeah. And so many of our themes for podcasts have inadvertently come back to get still, find that sense of safety and security within yourself. But also, I think we're now layering on this take responsibility for your healing. And the thing that I want to remind people is that your wounding is never your fault, but it is your responsibility to heal. And so have grace and compassion for yourself and whatever it is that you're working through and whatever you're healing. And you can also feel empowered to take responsibility for changing that. Whatever you're working through does not need to be a life sentence. And when we take responsibility for healing these things, like we get to dramatically change our entire lives and how we experience the world and what shows up. And it's a really powerful and inspirational place to be.
Absolutely. And I think that one of the things that has already shown up for me as in January, the nodes moved into Pisces and Virgo, and it's not new, but sometimes you have to hear things over and over again. It's when it's the right time for you to hear it that it actually moves the needle for you. And what really has shown up for me with the node shifting is, and I think it's because Saturn's in Pisces. And so this North Node in Pisces is getting that take responsibility part. But that concept of you're a grown up. So things that you want to change, things that you're not happy about, you can't bring your childhood stories into them anymore because it's not, yes, those are wounds that need to be healed. Yes, that the trauma experiences have happened. That's all real. That's not discounting that. And you have the opportunity to say, yes, this was an experience. Yes, I suffered from whatever, but I don't have to bring that suffering into the next. And in that healing of that chironic wound, of that wound that just, I want to say, has festered, right? These are wounds that are long time. This is not you got mad at your neighbor and it was a bad weekend. This is childhood wounds, ancestral wounds, things that you've carried with you forever. If you're a stellar grudge holder, these are those type of wounds, right? And in this energy, spirit is saying you got to release it. You got to let go because if you're going to keep holding on, it's going to be not a comfortable road. And I just heard them say, we've given you lots of chances. And so now, like, step in, take responsibility, be disciplined with your nutrition, your exercise, be disciplined with your meditation, be disciplined with your sleep habits, like all those things that support your health and well being. And I want to caution to say this is not about be perfect, be militant, but it's about ownership. And that's, I feel like, what this lunar eclipse in Virgo is really launching us into with this Pisces Virgo axis.
Yeah. I think that's when we come back to the word responsibility, it's responding with ability. It's not punishing yourself. It's not beating yourself up. It's not, right, berating yourself and pushing yourself harder and harder and harder to get and see whatever it is that you need to see. It is simply responding with ability in a healthy way. And I really believe that when we support ourselves and we take responsibility for our own healing, spirit rises the road up to meet us so that it can be as seamless of an unfolding and learning process as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. So from here, we're not going to go into the signs of how this is going to show up because it's really more of that global understanding for yourself. Where do you need to show up for yourself? Where do you need to let go of things? If something is removed from your life, how can you see it for the good? Everything's happening for me, not to me, because this eclipse season, it's a new type of eclipses that we haven't experienced for a while. So we're coming into this new energy. We're coming off of multiple months of very interesting collective energy. And I feel like things are about to get a little spicier through this collective energy. And also, they're saying to me, when things are being released in the collective, when something is dissipating, it's no more. How can we see that for the good? And it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be in agreement with how it happened or what happened, but how can we see things? They're saying things evaporating out of thin air. How can we see that that is the one step in the evolution into the new world we're creating? It's not a a demise and a demise and destruction that can't be overcome. It's a removal process, and that's it. Just like internally, so as above, whatever. You know what I'm saying, right?
As above, so below. Yeah. As
As within,
above, so
so
below.
without, that whole thing.
Yeah. As within, so without. As above, so below. Yes. Yes, yes, yes. Yeah. So sounds like we need to lean in, take responsibility for what within us is calling to be healed, bringing more love to those parts of ourselves. That's ultimately what we're talking about when we talk about healing wounds is the parts of us that need more love and need more conscious awareness so that we can step into something totally new, and this eclipse is really going to illuminate that for all of us. And so thank you for this discussion. I feel like this has been a really interesting one. And thank you all for listening. And if you know someone who would benefit from the wisdom within this podcast, please, please, please share it far and wide. And we will look forward to chatting with you all next time. Bye for now.